We're standing right on the edge of a massive economic shift, one that's being driven by AI and can honestly redefine everything we think we know about work and capitalism. So today, we're going to dive in and explore what happens when this new reality really takes hold.
So just start with this idea. Mull it over for a second. What if a single company could have the same output as a giant, sprawling corporation, but with only 1% of the people? It sounds like something straight out of science fiction, right? But it's actually the foundation of a new economic model that's already starting to bubble up.
Well, there's a name for this, the 99-1 firm. And you gotta understand, this isn't just some isolated little trend. Think of it as the very first domino. Once it tips over, it kicks off a chain reaction that could totally reshape the entire world of professional white-collar jobs.
All right, so if we're going to understand this whole chain reaction, we have to start with that very first piece, the catalyst. We need to get a really clear picture of what a 99-to-1 firm is exactly. Simply put, a 99-1 firm is a whole new breed of company. It's built for crazy high output with incredibly low labor. We're talking about a place where the real engine isn't thousands of people doing tasks, it's advanced AI systems doing almost all the heavy lifting, from data analysis all the way to customer service.
And when you see this in the wild, it looks weird, really weird. You start seeing companies with tiny headcounts putting out just massive amounts of value. The prices for digital services, think basic legal work, software, things like that, they just plummet because it costs almost nothing to make one more copy. Competition stops being about yearly plans and becomes this brutal, non-stop game of speed. And because of all this, markets start to concentrate way faster around the winners. It all revolves around who owns the new infrastructure layer, the AI models themselves, which are basically becoming the new railroads of the 21st century.
Okay, so you might be thinking, so what? A few of these super efficient companies pop up. Why can't the old economy just, coexist alongside them? Well, here's the thing. It can't. This is where that second domino falls. The simple existence of these firms kicks off an unstoppable chain reaction, a competitive arms race that forces literally everyone else to change or die.
It's a process that experts are calling the automation flywheel. And it works like this. Step 1. The first few companies that go all in on AI just crush everyone else on speed and profit margins. Step 2. Wall Street and investors totally notice, and they start throwing money at these AI-native firms, giving them cheaper capital to grow even faster. Step 3. This puts immense pressure on all the old-school companies. Their boards, their activist investors, they all start screaming, "We have to automate now, just to survive." And finally, Step 4. Automation isn't a cool new option anymore. It becomes the standard. The AI operating model is now a mandate from the very top.
So that's the story at 30,000 feet, right? The corporate chess match. But what does all this relentless pressure to automate mean for you, for me, for our careers? This is where things get personal, and where we see that traditional career ladder start to crack and completely fall apart.
You know how it used to work, right? For decades, the path was pretty clear. You get in as an intern or an analyst, you do the grunt work, you learn the ropes by doing all those tedious tasks, and you slowly climb the ladder. But here's the problem. AI is getting really good at that grunt work. The analyst years are getting automated away. And when those bottom rungs of the ladder disappear, it creates this massive experience trap. How are you supposed to get the experience you need for a senior job if the junior jobs that gave you that experience don't even exist anymore?
And look, this isn't some far-off futuristic theory. The data is already starting to show it. One recent analysis found about a 6% drop in employment for young people, 22 to 25-year-olds, in jobs that are highly exposed to AI. This has happened just since late 2022. Those first rungs of the ladder, they're already getting harder and harder to grab onto.
So, if the old path is broken, what's left? Where do people fit into this new picture? Well, it seems like the jobs that survive are falling into three main buckets. First, you've got the orchestrators. This is a small, elite, very well-paid group of people who direct the AI systems and handle the big strategic decisions. Second, you have the high-trust roles. These are jobs that need that human touch: negotiation, complex sales, leadership, crisis management. And third, you have the physical and care economy. Think healthcare, construction trades, hospitality, jobs that need a person to physically be there. What you end up with is this hollowing out of the middle, that traditional office job, and a workforce that's more polarized than ever.
Now, this massive shift, this polarization of the workforce, it creates a huge problem for the whole system. We're talking about a deep structural paradox that hits right at the very heart of how our modern economy is supposed to work.
Let's just state the problem as plainly as possible.
If you have these incredibly productive 99-1 firms churning out more goods and services more cheaply and efficiently than ever before, but you've automated away the incomes of millions of middle-class consumers, who's going to buy all that stuff?
At the end of the day, it boils down to this really simple truth. Mass production requires mass consumption. You can't separate them. If you break that link between work and income for a massive chunk of the population, it's not just a social issue, it's a catastrophic business problem. The entire economic engine just seizes up. And this is what leads to something called the barbell economy. Think about it, the 20th century economy. It was built on this big, fat, stable middle class, the mass market. But in the barbell economy, that middle gets completely hollowed out. All the demand gets pushed to two opposite ends. On one side, you have high-end luxury goods for a very small elite, and on the other, you have low-margin, bare-bones essentials for everybody else. That huge mass market that powered all that growth for decades, it starts to evaporate.
Okay, but a system that's this lopsided, this unstable, it just can't last. Something's got to give. It's forced to find a new balance. And this is what some are calling the Great Rebalancing. A pivot that doesn't happen because people feel like it, but out of pure, cold economic necessity.
And the logic behind this pivot is actually pretty simple when you think about it. Capital, big money, hates risk and instability way more than it dislikes the idea of redistribution. A predictable system where people can actually buy things is always better for business than a chaotic one where markets are collapsing. So, the billion-dollar question is, how does the system get purchasing power back into people's hands to keep itself from falling apart? Well, the toolkit of potential fixes is actually pretty well known. You've got everything from direct cash transfers, like an AI dividend or universal basic income, to things like universal basic services, which lower household costs, or even broader public ownership of the AI itself through big public funds. The goal is always the same. You have to get money back into the hands of the broader population to keep the economic engine running.
And that brings us to the one single question that this entire future hinges on. Everything we've talked about, the firms, the jobs, the rebalancing, it all comes down to this. Who owns the AI? Because the answer to that question, whether the unbelievable wealth this revolution will create is concentrated in the hands of a tiny few, or if its benefits are shared broadly, that will determine everything about the world we're building next.